One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. This is One Question, sponsored by Turnkey Search, and Jon Wilner with the San Jose Mercury News is with us today. Jon broke the story last Friday of a significant financial challenge that Cal Athletics faces right now. Projected deficit for the current fiscal year, over $21 million, and looking out a year greater or a year further, next year's fiscal year, we're still talking about a budget deficit in the $18 to $19 million range. Jon, I want to ask first about the greater context of what's going on in Berkeley for the university. We're talking about $140, $150 million deficit for the university as a whole. What's the context of how the deficit for the university got to this point and how it's now affecting athletics?
They have just spent, and there's a lot of folks up at Berkeley who would question some of that spending. It's been building up for several years. You throw in issues at the state level, tuition frozen, international and out-of-state enrollments frozen, and they have just gotten way behind. I was told during my research that they've done some studies that the cost, tuition even for an in-state student at Cal is about $13,000, and they've done some studies that they've determined the actual cost of a tuition or educating one kid is closer to $35,000. And that makes a lot of sense when you throw in, add it up all of the facets of higher education. So they are way behind. And yet with those bigger picture issues involving the state mixed in, they can't get out. They're in a trap. So even though they are now going to increase some of that stuff, tuition, enrollment, all those things, they're still way behind. No matter what road they go down, the university is way behind. So they've started cutting. Those numbers were for the fiscal year, $150 million deficit for fiscal year 16. They already have implemented procedures to cut about $40 million off of that. So we're looking at projected deficit in 2017 fiscal year of about $110 million. So athletics, if you mash up apples and apples, athletics was about $22 million deficit in 16 against $150 for the university. And in 2017, athletics is going to be $19 million versus about $110 million for the university. So athletics is certainly got its share of the campus-wide deficit, and that's why they have got this task force to determine what the proper way to proceed is long-term. And again, they have got big picture issues. Their stadium refinancing, they pay $18 million a year on average in interest-only payments right now. But starting in 2032, when the principal kicks in, their payments are going to be 30 and then eventually close to 40 million a year. So even though 2032 seems a long way off, for Cal Athletics to get everything aligned to be able to deal with those payments starting in 2032, they got to start soon. They got to get everything in order. And that money comes out of the athletic department operations budget. It is not coming from a different facet of campus. The athletic department is on the hook for that $450 million bonded project, and they need to get everything lined up as soon as they can.
Those are some really big debt service numbers, especially when you look out to 2032. Does Chancellor Dirks's exit or coming exit from campus impact this specific situation at all, or is it totally in the hands of the task force at this point?
Well, that's a real good question, and nobody exactly knows. Dirks has said he's staying until they find a successor. The task force is due, and there's no indication that there's going to be a successor when the calendar turns. Task force is due to make its recommendations to the university leadership group in January. Who is going to execute if they determine that the best thing to do is to cut sports, whether it's cutting 2, 4, or however many? if that's the determination, who's going to do that? Who's going to have that on their hands? Is it going to be Dirks before he leaves, leaving the mess for somebody who's coming in? Are they going to save it for whoever comes in? And that's the first thing they've got to deal with. Will they let their interim executive vice chancellor, Carol Christ, deal with it? Nobody knows. And that's certainly going to be I don't think that the vacuum in that regard, there's a vacuum. I don't think that that's going to impact the decision that gets made, but I think it could end up impacting when they implement whatever decision they make. Because it could be that they decide to wait till the summer to make a move on anything, or it could be that they decide in January, here's what we're gonna do. No, nobody knows.
In addition to the three potential options you laid out that the task force could decide on, which is additional support from the university at a significant financial level, pretty significant cuts to the sport portfolio, or some lesser significant cuts like they were planning in 2010 when I think it was baseball, men's and women's, gymnastics, rugby, and lacrosse maybe that were part of that deal. But how does this impact guys like Sonny Dykes and Konzo Martin and other head coaches who are running high profile programs who, by the way, those two cases, they just got extensions and increases just in the last 365 days. How does it impact their potential staying power on their own accord potentially in Berkeley?
Well, I don't know. In Dykes' case, I'm not sure there's much impact. I think that, my sense has always been with Sonny that if a good job opened up back in Texas, he'd be interested in it. Martin's case is a little different. Football's pretty much got what they need. They got a $175 million training center where their offices are. They're pretty set. Men's basketball, Cal, they want a practice facility of their own, and it's not getting done. And part of the reason it's not getting done is because of the financial situation. Now, I think Martin, a little bit like Dykes, if the right job opened up in the Big Ten, he would probably have to think pretty long and hard about it. He's from Illinois, East St. Louis area. But that's what happens when if you're a West Coast school and you're going to hire head coaches whose roots are in different parts of the country, you've got to expect that eventually they may want to get back there. The financial situation, though, I think has a much greater immediate impact on men's basketball just because of the lack of the practice facility. And there's no indication that that's going to get done anytime soon, given the structural deficit they're facing.
Of the three options, John, is there any sort of momentum that you sense within the committee at this point? I know they've publicly said absolutely no decisions have been made. That's come from Michael Williams, but also a campus spokesperson. But do you get the sense that any of the three options have more traction than another?
Well, I think that a couple of things, the old saying, two things can be equally true. Well, I think that the committee would prefer not, certainly some members of the committee, from what I've heard, would prefer not to cut sports. They really don't want to do it. They understand what a broad-based athletic program can mean for a university. But I also get the sense that everybody from the task force, the university administration, to athletics and coaches, fans, realizes that Cal's, their model is difficult to sustain, and that cutting sports is definitely very much a very, very real possibility. Whether it ends up being 2, 4, 6, I don't know how many, I don't know, but I think that if you surveyed, 100 people who had a real good feel for what's going on up there right now, the vast majority would tell you that they're probably going to end up doing it. It's just that the task force, I think, is going to make a very concerted effort to try to determine whether there are some other options. That's my sense. Remember, Cal is 30 public school with, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of big picture issues on the state level in terms of budget matters. They got 30 sports. And the chancellor's charge letter to the task force says, evaluate Cal's situation relative to peer schools in the Pac-12. Those are the big university Colorado, Arizona, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. It specifically lists those schools in the charge letter to the task force. Cal has more sports than any of those schools. UCLA is next with 25. Cal's got 30. Washington's, 21, 22. Colorado's at 17. Arizona's low 20s. Cal's got a different model. And you factor that model and all the costs, cost of attendance, rising costs for healthcare and benefits at the university. And then you factor in the debt service they have to pay on the stadium, and they are just in a very, very difficult situation, and something is going to have to give. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I think the model that they had, their 30 sport model, I think it's very likely that will have to give in some form or another.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.